Snow fell relentlessly, the fine, powdery flakes silently blanketing the main road of the small town. The wind howled past the wooden rooftops, carrying a bone-deep chill that kept any living soul from daring to appear in the pitch-dark night. Anna Harlow huddled beneath the sagging awning of a closed general store, her thin hands clutching an old worn canvas bag. Her shoulders shook in waves, though she couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the fear that had clung to her for months. The flimsy coat she wore, torn in several places, did nothing to stop the harsh mountain winter. Snow clung to her tangled black hair, melting into freezing droplets that trickled down her neck. Anna closed her eyes, trying to make herself smaller, as if disappearing into the darkness might make all the pain vanish. But the cold showed no mercy, and neither did the memories. Just hours earlier, the innkeeper, a suspicious-eyed older woman, had shoved her out of the tiny rented room. "I don't harbor thieves," she had said coldly, holding up her phone displaying an old online article. That article, with its scathing headline, accused Anna of embezzling family assets and committing financial fraud, a lie her own brother Victor had concocted to punish her for daring to expose his crimes. She had tried to explain, but the innkeeper's gaze only grew icier. "Get out before I call the sheriff," the woman threatened. And so Anna, with her bag containing everything she had left, was pushed into the blizzard. Now sitting under the awning, she felt her body going numb. Her frozen hands clutched the bag, which held only a few old clothes, a battered notebook, and a creased family photo, a keepsake she couldn't bring herself to throw away, though it only brought pain. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she had no money left to buy even a loaf of bread. She hadn't eaten anything in 3 days except a few stale crackers she'd found in an abandoned cafe. She told herself that if she could just survive this night, she would find a way to leave this town, go somewhere far away, where no one knew the name Anna Harlow. Faint headlights cut through the swirling snow, accompanied by heavy footsteps. Anna flinched, lifting her head, her heart thudding. A middle-aged man in a scuffed leather jacket staggered toward her. The stench of liquor wafted over her when he stopped, his dull eyes scanning her from head to toe. "Hey, sweetheart," he slurred. "What are you doing out here in this cold? Come get in my car. I've got a warm place you can sleep tonight. All you have to do is, help me out a little." He grinned crookedly, revealing yellowed teeth. Anna's stomach twisted, not from hunger but from disgust. She wanted to stand, to run, but her legs felt frozen to the ground. He stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol. "Come on now, don't pretend to be shy. You don't have any other options." His words were like a knife, cutting into the last shred of pride she had left. Anna thought of the months of wandering, the nights sleeping in park corners or cold warehouses. She was exhausted. For one weak moment, she wondered if this was the only way to survive the night. But then, another sound rose, the growl of an engine in the distance. 2 beams of bright light split the darkness, and an old rusted pickup truck pulled up beside the curb. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. The dim streetlight fell across his face, revealing a long scar running from his temple down his left cheek. His deep blue eyes fixed on the drunk without wavering. Without a word, he shrugged off the thick wool coat he was wearing, stepped forward and draped it over Anna's shoulders. The coat still held the warmth of his body, wrapping around her like an invisible embrace. "If you don't want to go with him," he said, his voice low and steady, "I have a safe place for you to stay tonight." His words carried no judgment, no curiosity, just a simple offer. Anna looked up, her tired blue eyes meeting the stranger's gaze. There was something in him, a calmness, almost a sorrow that made her feel she didn't have to be on guard right away. The drunk man stepped back, muttering something about "just kidding," then staggered off into the darkness. Anna clutched the coat tighter, its warmth seeping into her frozen skin. She searched the man's face for any sign of hidden motives, but he only stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting. "I don't have any money," she whispered, her voice hoarse from cold and exhaustion. "I have nothing to pay you with." "I don't want your money," he replied evenly. "Do you want to come with me?" Anna hesitated. After years of betrayal, first by her family, then by those who'd promised to help, this stranger's kindness felt like a trap laid in plain sight. But the cold was gnawing at her bones, and there was no deceit in his eyes. She drew in a deep breath, her exhale turning to a cloud of white in the air. then nodded. "All right," she said, her voice so small it was nearly swallowed by the wind. He led her to the truck, opening the passenger door for her. As Anna climbed inside, she felt the trembling in her body, not only from the cold, but from a fragile spark of hope that had just flickered to life. The man shut the door, rounded the hood to the driver's side, and started the engine. The truck shuddered and roared, and together they pulled away from the snow-covered road. Anna clutched her bag in her lap, staring out the window into the black night, wondering if she had just found a way out or stumbled into another mistake. The man said nothing the entire drive. His silence wasn't heavy. It felt like a protective wall shielding her from questions she wasn't ready to answer. She glanced at him, taking in the angular features, the black hair threaded with gray, and the long scar like an untold story. "My name is Anna," she said, her voice trembling, as if testing the silence. He nodded slightly, eyes still on the road. "Jacob," he replied simply, and said nothing more. Anna felt a strange relief. For the first time in months, no one demanded an explanation. No one interrogated her past. She leaned her head against the cold window, letting the warmth of Jacob's coat surround her. Just for tonight, she told herself, she would accept this kindness. Just for tonight, she would allow herself to hope. You're watching Soul Stories, where every story whispers of love, healing, and hope. Let us know which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and be a part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. The pale light of a winter morning slipped through the thin curtains, falling across the worn wooden floor of the small house. Anna woke up, her body still aching from the long night in the biting cold. She was lying on an old sofa, covered by a thick wool blanket that still held the warmth from the fire, crackling softly in the corner of the room. The scent of burning wood mingled with the faint aroma of coffee, pulling her out of her drowsy haze. She blinked, trying to steady herself, and realized she was no longer under the frozen awning of the town. This wooden house, humble as it was the first shelter she'd had in months of wandering. Anna sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her. She looked around, her gaze pausing on the small details of the room. A stone fireplace occupied one corner, the flames burning steadily, spreading a warmth she had nearly forgotten existed. Nearby, a faded photograph in a simple frame hung on the wall, showing a woman with a gentle smile and bright eyes. Anna wondered who the woman was, but her instincts told her not to ask. In another corner stood a dark wooden bookshelf filled with hardcovers and a few dog-eared paperbacks. A battered metal filing cabinet sat silently in the corner, as if it were guarding secrets no one should touch. Everything in the house was tidy, but there was a hollow feeling, as though the place had once held more than it did now. Light footsteps sounded from the kitchen. Anna turned her head to see Jacob walk in, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He wore a gray sweater and faded jeans, his black hair streaked with gray and slightly tousled. The long scar on his left cheek stood out in the dim light, but his deep blue eyes held a calm that was hard to read. "You're awake," he said, his voice low and even, setting a mug of coffee on the small wooden table in front of her. "Breakfast is over there, if you'd like." Anna looked down at the table, where a plate of toast with some butter and jam sat waiting. The warm smell made her stomach clench, reminding her how hungry she was. She hesitated, still clutching the blanket. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from so many days without speaking. She wasn't used to being treated kindly, and every gesture from Jacob made her brace for the cost she would eventually have to pay. Jacob sat down in the armchair across from her, sipping his coffee, his eyes turned toward the fire. He didn't ask who she was, where she'd come from, or why she'd been wandering alone in a blizzard. His silence was both comforting and unsettling. She wondered if he had read the online article accusing her of theft and fraud, the lies her brother Victor had created to destroy her. But if Jacob knew, he gave no sign of it. He simply sat there quietly, as if her presence in his home was the most ordinary thing in the world. "You can stay here a few days," Jacob said, his voice gentle but certain. "If you need work to earn some money, I have a few odd jobs around here. Cleaning out the shed, fixing the porch roof, cooking, things like that." He looked at her, his gaze free of judgment. "I don't need to know who you are, but if you want, you can start tomorrow." Anna blinked, trying to process his offer. No one gives anything for free, she thought, especially not to someone like her, a person her own family had cast out, whom this town saw as a criminal. I, I have nothing to pay you, she said, her voice trembling. I mean, I don't have money or anything. Jacob shrugged as if it didn't matter. I don't want money, just don't wreck my house. A fleeting smile touched his lips, but it disappeared quickly, leaving the usual pensive look behind. Anna picked up the mug of coffee, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen hands. She took a small sip, the gentle bitterness making her feel more awake. She looked at Jacob, trying to read his intentions, but he only sat there staring into the fire, as if the world beyond these walls didn't exist. She wondered who he was, why he lived alone in this secluded wooden house, and why he had opened his door to a stranger like her. But she didn't dare ask, not yet. She ate breakfast in silence, every bite of toast feeling like a precious gift. Jacob stood up, added a few logs to the fire, then took a coat from the rack near the door. I'm going out to check the fence behind the house, he said. You can rest. If you need anything, just call. He stepped outside, leaving Anna alone in the warm room, with the crackling fire and the lingering smell of coffee. Anna sat back on the sofa, pulling the blanket closer. She looked at the photo on the wall, the woman with the gentle smile. Had she once been part of Jacob's life? She wondered, but then shook her head, trying to push the curiosity away. She had no right to pry into his past, not when she herself was running from her own. She clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms as she tried to keep from crying. She didn't want to cry, not here, in a stranger's home. But in that moment, she realized something. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Not completely safe, not forever, but safe enough to let out a long breath and allow her body to relax, if only a little. This house, with its steady fire and Jacob's quiet presence, was a temporary refuge, and she, though afraid, decided she would stay at least until she was strong enough to keep moving. When Jacob returned, bringing a gust of cold air with him, he didn't say anything. He just nodded when he saw her still sitting there. He hung his coat on the rack, then sat down again with his coffee. Are you all right? He asked, his voice carrying no curiosity, just a simple question. Anna nodded, though inside she was a tangle of feelings, gratitude, suspicion, and a flicker of hope she didn't dare trust. I'm all right, she said, and for the first time, the words felt a little true. I'll help you clean out the shed, if you'd like. Jacob nodded, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Good, he said. Tomorrow then. He stood and walked toward the kitchen, leaving Anna alone with her thoughts. She watched his back, wondering what this man was hiding and whether she had the courage to stay longer than just one night. The pale winter morning light kept filtering through the curtains, but today Anna woke earlier, while the sky was still dim. The crackling of logs in the fireplace was the only sound inside Jacob's small wooden house, where she had been staying for 3 days. She sat up on the old sofa, the wool blanket slipping off her shoulders, revealing her thin arms still trembling from the cold that had sunk into her bones during all those months on the road. The faint smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, and she heard Jacob's soft footsteps, steady like the heartbeat of this house. Anna pulled the blanket around herself, looking around the room. Everything was just as it had been on the first day, the stone fireplace burning steadily, the faded photograph of the woman hanging nearby, the dark wooden bookshelf crammed with books, and the old metal filing cabinet locked tight in the corner. But today she looked more closely. She stood, walking quietly to the bookshelf, her fingers brushing over the hardcovers. Most were adventure novels and old science books, but behind them, hidden by a row of paperbacks, she spotted a few thick leather-bound volumes with titles embossed in faded gold letters. Criminal Law, Principles of Procedure. She froze, her heart thumping. Jacob had never spoken about his past, but these books told a story he didn't want to share. The kitchen door opened, and Jacob walked in, holding a steaming mug of coffee and a plate of toast. He wore a dark blue sweater and faded jeans, his black hair streaked with gray and slightly disheveled. The scar on his left cheek caught the dim light from the window. You're up early, he said in his low, steady voice, setting the plate on the table. I need to clear out the shed behind the house today. If you want, you can help. No rush, have breakfast first. Anna nodded, sitting down and picking up the mug. The warmth seeped into her hands, soothing the lingering cold. "Thank you, Jacob," she said, her voice small but clearer than it had been in those first days. Saying his name had become familiar now, a thin thread tying her to this quiet, mysterious man. She ate breakfast in silence, feeling the strange comfort of these ordinary moments. After so many months living in fear, sitting here eating toast in a warm house felt like an impossible dream. After breakfast, Anna followed Jacob out to the shed behind the house, a small wooden structure filled with old tools, wooden crates, and dusty pieces of furniture. The cold outside made her shiver, but Jacob handed her a pair of thick gloves and an old coat. "Take it slow," he said, nodding toward a corner stacked with boxes. "Sort these, see what's still usable, what needs to go." She nodded and started working. Clearing out the shed was a simple task, but it helped her focus and forget, for a while, the nightmares that had kept her awake the night before. In her dreams, she had seen Victor, her brother, with that cold, thin smile, holding up the paper, accusing her of theft. "You can't run forever, Anna," he'd said, and his voice had echoed in her head, jolting her awake, drenched in cold sweat. She glanced at Jacob, who was stacking firewood, and wondered if he was ever haunted by the past the way she was. The afternoon passed in quiet, broken only by the sounds of shifting wood and the wind howling outside. Anna found an old box in the shed, filled with papers and a few small photographs. She glimpsed a picture of Jacob, younger, without the scar, standing beside the same woman from the photo above the fireplace. She quickly set the box back where she'd found it, her heart beating fast. She didn't want to be caught digging through the remnants of his past. That evening, Anna helped Jacob prepare a simple meal: potato soup and bread. They sat across from each other at the wooden table, the light from the fire flickering over Jacob's face, accentuating his scar. Anna felt a pull, a question that had been lingering in her mind all day. She took a deep breath, summoning her courage. "Jacob," she said, her voice a little unsteady, "what did you do before you came here? I mean, before you lived here, alone?" Jacob paused, his spoon hovering midair. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and the scar on his cheek seemed deeper in the shadows. He set the spoon down, staring into the bowl of soup as if the answer lay somewhere in the rising steam. "Lawyer," he said, his voice clipped, almost abrupt. "I used to be a lawyer." Anna blinked, surprised he had answered her so directly. She wanted to ask more: where he had practiced law, why he'd left, why he'd come to a small town like this. But Jacob's eyes, calm as they were, held an invisible boundary. He stood picking up his bowl and carrying it to the kitchen. "The front porch leaks," he said, neatly changing the subject. "I need to fix it tomorrow. You can help if you'd like." Anna nodded, understanding that he didn't want to say any more. She felt a strange kinship between them, two people carrying wounds too heavy to name. She was certain Jacob had once been someone, had lived another life, but now he existed like a ghost, hiding in this wooden house. She wondered what had broken him, and whether she would ever have the courage to tell him about Victor, about the lies that had destroyed her life. That night, Anna lay on the sofa, listening to the wind whistling around the windows. She tried to sleep, but the nightmares of Victor returned. She clutched the blanket, trying to push the images away, but they clung to her like the winter cold. She looked toward the fireplace where the flames still burned steadily. The photograph of the woman hung there quietly, a reminder she wasn't the only one carrying a past. Jacob had his ghosts too, and even though she was afraid, even though she didn't dare trust completely, she felt a small flicker of hope that here, in this house, she might find a place to breathe, if only for a little while. The next morning, Anna woke with a new resolve. She would help Jacob fix the porch, would work to repay his kindness. She didn't know how long she would stay, but for the first time she wanted to, not because of the cold outside, but because of the warmth Jacob, in his quiet way, had given her. A month had passed, and the days in Jacob's wooden house had fallen into a new rhythm, fragile but steady, that Anna never thought she would experience again. Each morning she woke up on the old sofa, wrapped in the wool blanket, listening to the crackle of the fire and breathing in the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She helped Jacob with simple tasks, clearing out the shed, dusting the bookshelves, repairing the leaky porch roof. The work kept her occupied, letting her forget, if only briefly, the nightmares of Victor and the accusations that had driven her into the shadows. But even though the house brought her warmth, Anna was always afraid of the moment when everything would collapse like it always had before. That morning, snow was still falling lightly, laying a thin layer over the road leading into town. Anna stood by the window, staring out at the white-covered slopes, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee Jacob had made. She had begun to get used to his silence, the way he left a plate of toast on the table without a word, the way he added wood to the fire before going out to work. But she knew her past wouldn't simply disappear, and this small, lonely town was not a place she could hide forever. Jacob stepped inside carrying a chill from the outdoors. He took off his coat, hung it on the rack by the door, and sat down at the table with his own cup of coffee. "I need to go into town today," he said, his voice steady. "Need to buy more lumber and a few other things. Do you want to come?" Anna hesitated. She hadn't left the house since the night Jacob brought her here, afraid of the curious eyes of the townsfolk, but she also didn't want to be alone. "All right," she said softly, "I'll go." The trip into town was a test. The main street, even covered in snow, was busier than she'd expected, with people moving between the general store and the little cafe. Anna pulled her scarf up to cover half her face, trying to avoid the stares of strangers. But she still felt them furtive glances, quiet whispers as she and Jacob stepped into the hardware store. The shopkeeper, an old man with a silver beard, looked at her with suspicion before turning to Jacob, his tone suddenly friendlier. "Haven't seen you in a while, Thornton. Who's this?" Jacob answered curtly, "A friend." He didn't look at Anna, but there was a calm resolve in his voice that kept the old man from asking anything else. Anna lowered her head, feeling her heart hammering. She knew those whispers weren't harmless. Victor had made sure her name and the false accusations spread everywhere online. She only hoped this small town was too remote for anyone to notice. But that hope vanished that afternoon when a sleek black Jeep pulled up outside the house. Anna was dusting the bookshelf in the living room when she heard a firm knock on the door. Jacob, who'd been chopping firewood in the yard, came in, wiping his hands on his shirt before opening the door. Standing there was the town sheriff, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a thick uniform against the cold. "Thornton," he said in a low voice, "I need to talk to you about the woman staying here." Anna, hidden behind the bookshelf, felt the blood drain from her face. She gripped the rag in her hand, trying to steady her breathing, but her heart pounded in her ears. She heard Jacob answer, his tone cold but calm. "She's my guest. Is there a problem?" The sheriff lowered his voice, but Anna heard every word. "Some folks in town have been talking. Anna, right? They found an article online she's been accused of theft and fraud somewhere. I don't want trouble here, Thornton. You know who she is?" Anna's head spun. She wanted to run, to vanish before everything collapsed. But she couldn't move. She could only stand there listening as Jacob replied, "I know she needs help. That's enough for me." His voice didn't waver, not a trace of doubt. The sheriff cleared his throat. "I don't want to make this hard on you, but if something happens, you'll be responsible. Don't let this place turn into a haven for criminals." He turned away, his heavy steps crunching in the snow. When Jacob shut the door, Anna stepped out from behind the bookshelf, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble. I'll go." She hurried to the corner of the room where her old canvas bag sat. She began stuffing her few things inside, her mind blank except for one thought. She had to leave before she ruined Jacob's life. Jacob stood there for a long moment, his deep blue eyes never leaving her. "Anna," he said, his voice low but firm. She stopped but didn't look up, her hands clenching the bag. "If you leave," and he said, "don't do it because you think you don't deserve help." His words were like a blade, slicing through the wall of shame Anna had built around herself for years. She lifted her head, her vision blurred with tears. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "They're right. I am trouble. What they said. Those articles. They'll never leave me alone. You don't have to get involved." Jacob stepped closer, stopping just near enough that she could feel his warmth, though he didn't touch her. "I don't care what they say," he said quietly. "I care about what I see. And I see someone who needs a place to stay, a chance to start over. You don't have to keep running." Anna shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, or what they say I did. I don't need to know, Jacob replied, his voice gentle but steady. You're here, and you're trying. That's what matters. He nodded toward the fireplace, where the flames still burned steadily. This house doesn't have much, but it has room for you, if you want it. Anna looked at him, and in his eyes she saw no judgment, only a sincerity she wasn't used to receiving. She let the bag fall from her hands, landing softly on the floor. All right, she said, her voice small but steadier. I'll stay, but only until I'm not causing trouble for you. Jacob nodded, a flicker of a smile crossing his face. Good, he said. Tomorrow we'll fix the porch. Now eat dinner, your soup's getting cold. Anna sat down at the table, feeling an invisible weight lift from her shoulders. She was still afraid of Victor, afraid of the past, afraid of the whispers in town. But for the first time, she felt she might be able to face them, even just a little, because Jacob, in his steady silence, was standing beside her. More than a week later, night fell over Jacob Thornton's wooden house, laying a fresh layer of snow that sparkled under the dim porch light. Inside, the fireplace burned steadily, radiating a warmth that defied the freezing cold outside. Anna sat on the familiar sofa, clutching a mug of hot tea, her eyes unfocused as she stared at the flames. The sound of an engine rumbled in the distance, breaking the quiet of the mountainside. Anna jumped, nearly dropping her tea. She glanced at Jacob, who sat in the armchair across from her, reading an old book. He lifted his head, his deep blue eyes narrowing in caution. The engine drew closer, then stopped right in front of the house. A forceful knock thundered against the door, almost threatening, making Anna's heart clamp tight. Jacob rose, setting the book on the table, and walked to the door with a calm but resolute stride. Anna gripped her mug, trying to steady her breath, but a bad feeling made her hands tremble. When Jacob opened the door, a blast of cold air rushed in, carrying the silhouette she dreaded most. Victor Harlow, her brother. Victor stepped inside, smug in his expensive long coat, snow clinging lightly to his shoulders. He waved a piece of paper, the same forged accusations of theft. Hello, little sister, he said, his voice sweet but ice cold. Did you really think you could hide forever? Come home, or this goes straight to the police. Anna trembled, memories of Victor's manipulation flooding back. Jacob moved to stand between them, his gaze sharp and unflinching. She doesn't belong to you, he said, his voice hoarse but steady. This is my house. Leave. Victor's smile turned thin. And who are you to interfere in my family's business? She's a thief, a liar. Jacob didn't move. I know enough, he replied. Leave, or I'll call the sheriff. Victor's hand tightened around the paper, anger flashing in his eyes. One day, Anna, he hissed, then turned and stalked out, the door slamming behind him. Anna collapsed onto the sofa, tears streaming down her cheeks. He won't stop, she whispered. I have to go, Jacob. Jacob sat across from her, his expression resolute. Anna, you don't have to run. Not this time. She shook her head. Victor has money, power. He took everything from me, my parents' estate, my reputation. He'll ruin you. Jacob's eyes drifted to the photograph of Clara hanging near the fireplace. I used to be a lawyer, he said quietly, voice rough. I specialized in taking down men like Victor. But then I failed. Clara, my fiancée, was a journalist. She was investigating a corrupt corporation. I represented her, but I was too confident. I didn't see them coming. They staged an accident and killed her. I tried to protect her, and they came after me. This scar came from that night. He touched his cheek. I quit law, went into hiding because I couldn't bear to lose again. But with you, Anna, I want to try. Anna blinked, startled by the raw honesty in his voice. Why would you risk this for me? She asked. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, Jacob said. Tell me about Victor. I'll find a way. Anna nodded, her voice small but certain. All right, but if this goes badly, I don't want you to get hurt. Jacob stood in the corner of the room near the bookshelf, his deep blue eyes thoughtful. His silence, usually a comfort, now made Anna feel she had to speak the whole truth. If Jacob was going to help her, he deserved to know everything. She drew a deep breath, set her mug down, and began. Jacob, she said, pausing as she looked down at her hands clenched together. My parents died 3 years ago in a car accident. They left behind a lot money, land, shares in the family company. Victor, my brother, wanted it all. He forced me to sign papers, giving up my inheritance, telling me I wasn't capable, that I'd destroy everything. He controlled me, like I had no right to decide anything. I signed some of the documents already. Jacob sat back down in the armchair across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. Anna went on, her voice wavering as she spoke of painful memories. Then I found out he had a girlfriend. She was only 16. I saw the disgusting messages he sent her, the things he did. I couldn't stay silent. I went to the police, but he got away. He has money, lawyers. And then he came after me. He was afraid he couldn't control me anymore. He made up this story that I stole the family's money, that I committed fraud. He said if I didn't do what he wanted, he'd have me thrown in jail. I ran away because I didn't know what else to do. Tears rolled down Anna's cheeks, but she didn't stop. He wanted me to live like a puppet or lose everything. I lost my family, my friends, my reputation. I've been hiding, surviving however I could, until I met you. I didn't think I could fight him, not until I met you. Jacob was silent, his eyes darkening as though her story touched something buried deep inside him. He stood up, walked to the wooden table, and took a blank sheet of paper and a pen. Anna, he said, his voice rough but steady, I'm not just someone who gave you a place to stay. I was one of the best lawyers in cases like this financial fraud, abuse of power. But I failed once, and it cost me the woman I loved. He paused, his fingers brushing the scar on his cheek. I can't keep hiding forever, he said. Anna blinked, surprised by the pain and determination in his voice. She looked at the picture of Clara hanging near the fireplace and saw the gentle smile, the defiant eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't know. Jacob shook his head. It's not your fault, but now, Anna, I want to try again. To beat men like Victor, we have to find his weaknesses. Tomorrow I'll reach out to a few old contacts colleagues, prosecutors, people who can dig up information on him, the transactions he used to frame you, the papers he forced you to sign. There will be a trail. I'll draft a counter-complaint pointing out the inconsistencies in his accusations. He sat down at the table and started writing, his handwriting strong and precise, as if the instincts of a lawyer had never left him. Anna stood and stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. She didn't understand all the details. He was noting a document listing the contradictions in Victor's accusations, from mismatched dates to suspicious transactions, but she didn't need to. She could see the focus in Jacob's eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly yet moved with the assurance of someone who knew this battlefield. Jacob, she said, her voice quiet but resolute, if you do this, I want to face Victor. Jacob looked up, his gaze filled with respect. All right, he said. I'll need you to tell me everything you remember about the family company, about the times he made you sign documents. Anything could be a key. Anna nodded, feeling a spark of hope flicker to life. She sat down at the table and began to recount at all meetings with Victor's lawyer, the bank accounts she'd glimpsed by accident, the way he bragged about his companies. Jacob took careful notes, occasionally stopping to clarify a detail. They worked late into the night, the firelight casting shadows on their faces, wrapping them in an atmosphere both tense and intimate. Anna watched Jacob and saw not only his professionalism, but the sorrow in every small movement, the way his hands shook when he wrote, the way his eyes flickered to Clara's photo. She realized that what he was doing wasn't only for her, it was for himself too. A way to face the past, to reclaim something he had lost, and that made her feel like she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time, she believed she could fight not only because of Jacob, but because of herself. When the clock struck midnight, Jacob set his pen down and stacked the papers neatly. Get some rest, Anna, he said, his voice gentle but sure. Tomorrow I'll start reaching out to my contacts. We'll find Victor's weakness. Anna nodded, pulling the blanket around her as she lay down on the sofa. Victor's threats were still there, but now they weren't the only voice in her mind. Jacob's voice, low, steady, full of promise, had joined them, like a small flame in the dark. She closed her eyes, feeling a fragile but powerful peace. She wasn't prey anymore. She was a fighter, and she had Jacob beside her. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere inside Jacob's wooden house was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. The fireplace still burned steadily, but its warmth couldn't drive away the chill of what was happening beyond the walls. Anna stood near the bookshelf, her hand clenched around a dust rag, trying to keep calm as an engine rumbled up the road toward the house. She recognized the sound. It was the same sleek, black Jeep Victor had driven before. Her heart pounded and the familiar fear rose again, like an animal awakened. Jacob, who was sorting through a stack of files on the wooden table, looked up, his deep blue gaze cold and steady. "Stay here," he said, his voice low, before he walked to the door, just as the knock thundered through the house. The door swung open, and Victor stepped inside, bringing a gust of cold air and his familiar smugness. He wore a dark suit and a long overcoat lightly dusted with snow, his hair slicked back to a shine. Behind him stood a middle-aged man in a cheap suit holding a briefcase. Victor's private lawyer, Anna guessed. The town sheriff was with them too, bundled in a thick uniform, his stern face drawn and uneasy. "Thornton," the sheriff said, his tone flat. "We need to talk about Miss Harlow." Anna felt her knees weaken. She stepped back until her back pressed against the bookshelf, her hand trembling. Victor looked at her, that thin smile on his lips like a sharpened blade. "I told you, Anna," he said, his voice sweet but laced with threat. "You can't hide forever. Sheriff, do your job. She needs to be taken into custody immediately." Jacob stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders a wall between her and the others. He didn't speak at first. He simply looked at Victor, then at the sheriff, and finally at the lawyer. His gaze was glacial, but it never wavered. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice low and even, as if he were standing in a courtroom rather than his own home. Victor laughed, though the sound did nothing to mask the tension in his eyes. "On what grounds? She's a thief, a fraud. I have proof." He lifted a bundle of papers, the same ones he'd waved in Anna's face before. "These documents prove she stole from the family estate. Sheriff, you know what you need to do." The sheriff looked at Victor, then at Jacob, hesitation written plainly on his face. "Thornton, I don't want trouble here, but these allegations are serious. We have to take her in for questioning." Anna's mind reeled. She wanted to scream, to tell them it was all lies, that Victor had orchestrated everything to punish her, but the words stuck in her throat. She could only stand there, feeling like prey cornered by a pack. She glanced at Jacob, waiting for him to step aside, to tell her she'd have to handle this alone. But he didn't. Instead, Jacob walked to the table and picked up the thick file he'd been preparing for days. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and laid it out on the table. "Before you take anyone," he said, looking the sheriff square in the eye, "you'd better look at this." He pushed several papers forward, bank statements, contracts, and his own handwritten notes. "These accusations have too many holes. The transaction dates don't match. The accounts supposedly stolen are linked to shell companies Victor controls. I recommend you pass this to the district attorney for review." Victor's lawyer, a short man whose glasses slid down his nose, stepped forward and flipped through the documents with visible disdain. "What is this?" he demanded, voice dripping with contempt. "Who do you think you are to challenge verified allegations?" Jacob's gaze didn't waver. "I used to be a lawyer," he said, his voice icy, "and I know when a story doesn't add up. These documents show Victor Harlow may have manipulated evidence to frame Anna. If you don't believe me, let the district attorney decide." Victor barked out a laugh, but there was strain in it, and the smugness was gone. "You're gambling with your life, Thornton," he sneered. "You have no idea who you're up against." "I know enough," Jacob replied, his voice as sharp as a blade. "And I know you don't have the right to walk into my home and threaten my guest. Sheriff, I request you delay any arrest of Anna Harlow until the district attorney reviews this evidence. If you proceed otherwise, I'll see you explain it before the circuit court." The sheriff looked from Jacob to Victor, clearly wishing he wasn't caught between them. He leafed through Jacob's documents, his frown deepening as he read the detailed notes and carefully arranged evidence. "All right," he said at last, his voice reluctant. "I'll forward this to the DA. But Thornton, if this is a stunt, you'll answer for it." "It's not a stunt," Jacob said, locking eyes with Victor, "and I suggest he leave. Now." Victor stood there, gripping his papers so hard his knuckles whitened, his face flushed with anger. "She's my sister," he spat. "You have no right to keep her." "She's not your property," Jacob said, his voice low but powerful. "She's my guest. Leave." Anna stood behind Jacob, feeling for the first time truly protected. She looked at his broad back, the way he stood unflinching in front of Victor, the man she had feared her entire life. She was still trembling, but not from fear. She felt something new rising in her, a strength she hadn't known she possessed. For the first time, she didn't want to run. She wanted to stand here, beside him, and face Victor. Victor's eyes flicked between them, rage and something like helplessness warring on his face. "This isn't over, Anna," he said, his voice low and menacing. He turned sharply, motioned for his lawyer to follow, and stalked out, the door slamming behind them. The Jeep's engine roared, then slowly faded down the road, leaving the house in heavy silence. Anna let out a shaky breath, as if she'd just been pulled up from underwater. She sank onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands, trying to hold back her tears. "He won't stop," she whispered. "He'll come back." Jacob turned, sitting down across from her, his gaze softening but still steady. "He might try," he said, "but he won't win. Not with this." He nodded at the files on the table. "The district attorney will see what I see, and I won't let you face this alone." Anna looked up at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Why are you doing this, Jacob?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You don't have to risk everything for me." Jacob met her eyes, and there was a sincerity there she had never seen in anyone. "Because you deserve a chance," he said, "and because I once lost someone, I won't let that happen again." Anna felt her heart tighten. She looked at him, saw the scar on his cheek, the determination and pain behind his steady gaze. She knew he was fighting not only for her, but for himself, for everything he had lost. And in that moment, she felt the bond between them, something real, a trust she'd never dared to hope for. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small but sure. "I'll stay, and I'll fight with you." Jacob nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Good." Anna looked at him, feeling a new strength settle in her chest. Victor was still a threat, but with Jacob beside her, she no longer felt like prey. She was part of a team, and for the first time, she believed she could win. The weeks following the confrontation with Victor passed in a tense but hopeful atmosphere inside Jacob Thornton's small wooden house. Every day, Anna woke up with a mixture of anxiety and determination, her eyes often drifting to the stack of files on the wooden table, where Jacob carefully added notes and evidence. The fireplace still burned steadily, but now the flames felt like more than warmth. They were a symbol of the small fire burning in Anna's chest, the hope that she could take her life back. Jacob worked tirelessly, communicating with the district attorney through short calls and handwritten letters. He kept everything simple, avoiding complex legal jargon when he explained things to Anna, but she could see the professionalism in every movement, the way he organized documents, the way he annotated details, the way he analyzed each inconsistency in Victor's claims. She took part too, recounting every detail she could remember about Victor's shady transactions, his threats, and the painful story of the underage girl she had tried to protect. In a moment of boldness, Anna contacted that girl and persuaded her to testify against Victor. Her testimony, though late, became a crucial piece of the case. At night, Anna and Jacob sat by the wooden table, the firelight flickering across their faces. Jacob listened to her, not only as a lawyer but as a friend, an ally. She began to share more not just about Victor, but about all the years she had felt like a puppet under her brother's hand. Jacob opened up too, even if only a little, telling her about Clara, his fiancée, who had believed in justice but never got to see it carried out. Their stories, though different, wove together in a quiet empathy that created a connection deeper than Anna had ever imagined. Finally, on a cold morning, A letter from the district court arrived. Jacob opened the envelope, his eyes focused as he read each line. Anna stood beside him, her hand gripping the edge of the table, hardly able to breathe. "What does it say?" she asked, her voice shaking. Jacob looked up and a rare smile spread across his face. "The charges against you have insufficient evidence," he said, his voice low but clear. "They've been dismissed. Furthermore, Victor is under investigation for perjury, financial abuse, witness intimidation, and sexual harassment of a minor. That girl's testimony helped a lot." Anna blinked as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The room spun around her, and it felt like the world had shifted in an instant. I'm free," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Truly free?" Jacob nodded, placing the letter gently on the table. "Truly," he said. "You fought for this, Anna. I just helped you see that you deserve to know the truth." The tears came then, unstoppable. Anna broke down, not out of pain, but out of a relief so profound it felt like a giant weight had been lifted from her chest. She covered her face, her shoulders shaking as years of fear and shame melted away. Jacob stood, walked to her side, and for the first time, he reached out and pulled her into an embrace. He didn't say anything, just held her tightly, letting her cry, letting her release everything she had held inside for so long. Anna leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steady presence of him. In that embrace, she felt safe, truly safe for the first time in her life. She was no longer the girl huddled under a frozen awning, no longer the outcast her family had abandoned. She was Anna Harlow, the woman who had stood up to Victor and won, and she hadn't done it alone. "Thank you, Jacob," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to me." Jacob pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. "You did this, Anna," he said, his deep blue gaze steady. "I just helped you see you could. And that girl, she came forward because of you. That's your strength, not mine." Anna shook her head, tears still running down her face. "No, Jacob, you gave me a place to stay, a reason to stay. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Jacob looked at her, and in his eyes was a glimmer of pain, but also a new peace. He glanced at Clara's photograph on the wall, her gentle smile watching over them. "Clara always said justice wasn't just about winning in court," he said, his voice rough. "It was about helping someone stand up again, helping them find themselves. I think I finally did that, because of you." Anna felt her heart tighten. She knew Jacob hadn't only been fighting for her, but for Clara, for everything he had lost, for all the mistakes he had carried. But he had chosen her. He had chosen to stand by her, and that gave her a sense of worth she'd never dared to hope for. She stepped to the fireplace, looking up at Clara's photograph. "She must have been an incredible person," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "And I think she would be proud of you." Jacob didn't answer right away, but she saw his shoulders relax, as if some invisible burden had finally lifted. "Thank you, Anna," he said, his voice low and warm. "And you should be proud of yourself." They stood there a while, in the hush of the little house, with only the crackle of the fire and the soft wind outside the windows. Anna felt a journey of healing beginning inside her. She was no longer the woman defined by Victor's lies. She was someone who had stood up, fought back, and reclaimed her dignity. And Jacob, with his quiet strength, had helped her see it. That day they shared a simple meal, soup and bread, like so many nights before. But this time the air between them felt different. No longer weighed down by dread, it was a peaceful companionship. Anna talked about her old dreams, opening a cafe, working with children, things she'd once believed were impossible. Jacob listened, nodding, and for the first time, she saw him smiling more often, even if they were small, fleeting smiles. When night fell, Anna lay on the sofa, watching the fire. For the first time, she felt truly at peace, felt that she was protected, that she belonged somewhere. She closed her eyes, feeling a new quiet strength. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled her. With Jacob beside her, she knew she could face whatever the future would bring. Winter slowly receded from the mountainside, the thick layers of snow giving way to patches of tender green grass, and the first wildflowers blooming in the early spring sun. Jacob's small wooden house had become something more than shelter. It had become a true home. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the worn wooden floors, as if the house itself were breathing in rhythm with the new life taking root inside it. Anna stood outside the stable, holding a bucket of feed, smiling as a brown horse nuzzled grain from her hand. Jacob stood beside her, checking the newly repaired fence, his deep blue eyes softer than they had been when she first met him. Together they had worked to care for this small farm, tending the horses, fixing the barn, planting rows of vegetables behind the house. Sometimes there were moments of playful joy, like when they watered the garden and ended up soaked, laughing like children, or when Jacob wiped a smudge of dirt from Anna's cheek. These simple routines, along with the dinners they cooked side by side in the kitchen, had woven into a new rhythm, a life Anna had never dared to imagine. One afternoon, as they sat at the wooden table eating tomato soup and toast, Anna looked at Jacob, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Jacob," she said, her voice soft but sincere, "thank you, not just for giving me a place to stay, but for giving me somewhere to belong." She paused, taking a deep breath. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I truly have a home." Jacob looked at her, and a rare smile lit his face, softening the scar on his left cheek in the gentle light. "You've made this place feel like home, Anna," he said, his voice warm and steady. "I only had a house. You brought it to life." His words were simple but so genuine that Anna felt her heart fill with a warmth as bright as the spring sunlight on her skin. The news about Victor arrived weeks later in a letter from the district attorney. He had been indicted for perjury, financial abuse, witness intimidation, and charges of sexually exploiting a minor, thanks to the testimony of the girl Anna had convinced to come forward. The family assets Victor once controlled were redistributed by the court, and Anna received a significant share, enough to start over without worrying about money. But to Anna, the real victory wasn't wealth. It was freedom, the knowledge that she was no longer imprisoned by the past. She and Jacob decided to use part of the settlement to build a shared dream. They opened a small cafe on the edge of town, a cozy place with wooden tables and a little fireplace where people could gather, talk, and forget the winter cold. Next to it, they created a free legal aid center for the vulnerable, for people like Anna had once been, abandoned by the system or preyed upon by men like Victor. Jacob, with his experience as an attorney, provided counsel while Anna managed the cafe and supported those who came for help. Every day they worked side by side, sharing the simple, meaningful moments, from brewing morning coffee to reading case files late into the night. On the day the legal center opened, the small town buzzed with unusual activity. The same people who had once looked at Anna with suspicion now smiled at her. Some even brought wildflowers or homemade bread to celebrate. The cafe smelled of fresh cookies, and laughter filled the warm space. Anna stood behind the counter in a pale blue sweater, her dark hair tied back, her eyes alight with a joy she hadn't believed she'd ever feel again. Jacob stood in a corner of the cafe, talking to a few townspeople about the center's services. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and the scar on his cheek had become just another part of him, not a symbol of pain anymore. When the last of the guests began to leave, the sunset poured golden orange light through the windows. Anna watched Jacob, feeling a gratitude that went deeper than words, not only for what he had done, but for who he was, the man who had given her a reason to believe in love and hope. Jacob walked over, his hands in his pockets, his expression a little hesitant, but full of quiet resolve. "Anna," he said, his voice low, "I want to show you something." He led her out behind the cafe to a small corner strung with twinkling lights and a bed of newly planted wildflowers. He stopped, took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee and pulled a simple silver ring from his pocket, the band gleaming in the last light of day. "Anna Harlow," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I don't want to save you. I want to build a real home with you, a place where we both belong. Will you marry me?" Anna blinked as tears welled up, not from pain but from a happiness so bright it filled every part of her. She looked into Jacob's eyes so full of love, hope, and a promise of the future they could build together. I never believed I could be loved," she whispered, her voice breaking through her tears. But now I believe. Yes, Jacob. Yes. She reached out, and Jacob gently slid the ring onto her finger. He stood, pulling her into his arms, his warmth wrapping around her like the old wooden house had during those long, cold nights. They stood there in the golden dusk, surrounded by the lights and wildflowers, feeling a new beginning open before them. Anna rested her head against Jacob's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She thought about the road she had traveled from, the girl huddled under a frozen awning, abandoned by her family, to the woman standing here in the arms of the man she loved, with a home and a purpose. She thought of Clara, the woman in the photograph, and felt a deep gratitude. Clara had been right. Everyone deserves a chance, and Jacob had given her that chance. Jacob, too, felt a peace he had never believed he would find again. Looking at Anna, he saw not just the woman he loved, but proof that he could redeem the mistakes of his past. He had lost Clara, but with Anna he had found a reason to open his heart again, to live and love fully. As they walked back into the cafe, the lights still glowed, and the laughter of the last few townspeople floated around them like music. Anna slipped her hand into Jacob's, the silver ring cool against her skin, a reminder of their promise. Spring had come, bringing wildflowers, warm sunlight, and a future full of hope. The wooden house, the cafe, the legal center, they were all part of the home they were building, not just for themselves, but for everyone who needed a place to belong. Anna looked up at Jacob, smiling through the last light of sunset. "We did it, didn't we?" she said, her voice soft but full of certainty. Jacob nodded, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We did," he said, "and we'll keep going."